Good afternoon and welcome to Who's Right in our new year, our second year of the show, 2012. We're happy to have as our first guest this year Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Hi, Ron.
Sandra, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. We're so happy to have you here. We've been trying to get you on the show for so long, and now we have you, and I am just thrilled to be able to sit down and ask you some questions.
I'm happy to do it.
The first thing I wanted to ask you is, right here at the first of the year, President Obama, January 4th, appointed Richard Cordray, the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and he did it on a recess appointment when, in fact, the Senate is not on recess. Tell me what you feel about that.
Well, I think it's clearly unconstitutional. Another demonstration really of how incredibly arrogant this president is. He's making himself a king almost. But the fact of the matter is the Senate is not in recess. We've been holding pro forma sessions, and we've done that specifically so that he would not be able to make these recess appointments. The other requirement for the Senate to be in recess is the House would have had to agree for us to be in recess, which it didn't agree. So I think the larger point here is that the advise and consent prerogative of the United States Senate was designed to limit the growth in government. The genius of our founding fathers really, I think, starts with the fact that they recognized that government by and large was something to fear. And so they established the United States Senate in particular, almost uniquely, as a check, a way to limit the growth in government, and a check and a balance on the executive branch, and quite honestly the judicial branch as well. That's the advice and consent clause is extremely important for checking the power of the other branches. And this president now is running roughshod over it. The recess appointment is in the Constitution, but if you really think about it, that was written 200 years ago when Congress was really meant to be a part-time body. Members of Congress, House members and senators, there are an awful lot of farmers there. And so Congress came into session, and then they actually recessed so these folks could go home and they could plant their crops, they could watch them grow, they could harvest them, and then they would come back. And the founders recognized that, so they put the capability, or gave the president the capability to make recess appointments so that some of these agencies that were incredibly important, if somebody left, resigned or died in office, he could actually make that appointment. But now we're a 3-hour plane trip away.
Right.
And the value of those recess appointments is not as strong as it once was.
I see. So is there anything that can be done about this, or it's a done deal and he's got him in there? And the problem is, of course, with it is the regulations that now he will have the right to put into place.
Either the NLRB, with those appointments, they'll start issuing rules, or now the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will start issuing the rules that they've already been writing. And what will end up happening is those rules will be issued, and then whatever citizen or whatever business or whatever group that rule applies to will now hence have standing to challenge that rule, and somebody will. And so we'll just create even greater uncertainty. These rules will be put in place, and then it'll go into the courts. And let's face it, our judicial system is not a real rapid response type of process. So we'll just increase the level of uncertainty in our economy. It's not a good thing.
So it's bad for business, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it
was a totally political move, because these rules won't stand. I think these rules will be ruled unconstitutional. They won't be in effect. And all it is President Obama is making a political statement that he is going to run against a do-nothing Congress. But I mean, that's his election. That's his whole election strategy. And let's face it, he, through his surrogate, the majority leader, Senator Harry Reid, they're making sure it's a do-nothing Congress.
I see. Incredible. They're tying your hands, in other words.
Sure.
Wow. Well, he also just passed another law from the Pentagon. He made an announcement saying that our military budget was going to be cut like in half or something.
Well, they're going to reduce it by about $500 billion over the next 10 years. And then, of course, we have the $500 billion of sequestration with the whole debt ceiling agreement that's also going to be coming down the Pentagon as well.
And that's just incredible to me, because also he is making it so that we can only fight a war on one front. And what do you think of that? When you think of that, what do you think of our country and the security here in the United States?
I think it's important for everybody to realize, let's face it, the defense of the nation is the top priority of a government. That's really why we have it.
Right.
And I think it's important for people to really understand the real facts and figures here. During the last decade, primarily when President Bush was in power, the average spending, defense spending, was about 3.6% of the size of our economy. So 3.6 of our GDP. The prior decade, when President Bill Clinton was primarily in power, it was 3.8%. The 2 decades before that is about 5.6%. Wow. Now, since President Obama has taken office, defense spending as a percentage of GDP has increased slightly from about 4.1 to 4.7, and this year will be about 5.1%. But these cuts, I just read this in the Wall Street Journal, will take us by 2021 to about 2.7%. That's
astonishing.
Our defense spending as a percentage of our economy will be as low as it was in the year 1940, prior to World War II. So again, I'm highly concerned about the fact that President Obama is going to hollow out our military. And you take a look at spending as a relationship to GDP, not as the indicator of how you should set your spending. Our defense spending should be tailored toward addressing the threats that we face. And so I'm all for thorough reviews, really on an annual basis, of really what threats do we face and how do we structure our military force, and what should we spend to make sure that we can address those threats. So again, it's our defense budget is about $700 billion large. I'm sure there's areas that we can cut back on. I'm sure there's ways we can become more efficient and we can target our resources in a more effective manner. But I don't think this president's necessarily doing it that fashion. He's just basically taking a meat axe to the defense budget.
Wow. And it's so, the timing to me is just so ridiculous, because we're dealing with the Straits of Hormuz right now. And that is, what do you think of that situation? What is your opinion of what's going on over there and what the conditions could turn into?
Well, President Obama started making mistakes with handling Iran right from the get-go. The first thing, almost the first action he undertook when he became president, was he canceled the missile defense sites in Poland and the Czech Republic.
Right.
And that was really that was to really defend us against potential ballistic missiles coming from Iran. That was really the main point of that. And he thought that with his magnetic personality, he could actually deal with the moles in Iran. And he hasn't succeeded particularly well there. They've continued in a very overt fashion to continue to develop their nuclear capability. And right now, Pakistan is giving us fits, primarily because they have nuclear capacity. I shudder to think what this world is going to look like, what the Middle East is going to look like if Iran has a nuclear capability.
Right.
And this president has just really fumbled the football. When the courageous students in Iran, protested because their election was basically stolen,
right,
this president remained mute. He remained silent for a couple weeks. Wouldn't even give them, a little presidential support.
Right.
A few words of support, which might have turned the tide.
Yes, it could.
That was a real shame. That was
Yeah.
a real blown opportunity.
Right. So now we sit here in a very precarious position, because we don't know what's going to go on over there. We've got North Korea in a situation where they've got a new 27-year-old leader. The whole world is just in a very tenuous situation. And what is he doing? He's cutting back our military to a point that's lower than we've had it since the 40s.
If you want to maintain peace, you need to exhibit strength. The best way to avoid war is to make sure that nobody would ever want to go to war with you. What you don't want to do is you don't want to exhibit weakness.
Right.
It's the worst possible thing you can do. So again, we need to maintain our military strength so we hopefully don't have to use it.
I see. Yeah. Well, I understand that you're working on some strategy with Paul Ryan. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I think the problem we've had over the last year is, really in a good faith effort on the part of Republicans trying to negotiate with President Obama, who, by the way, simply didn't negotiate in good faith, to actually start acknowledging the problem and start working toward a solution. A lot of those negotiations, the majority of them were done behind closed doors, out of view of the American public. And I didn't like that, by and large, because it didn't inform the American public. It didn't show that there are real differences in terms of what the Republican fiscal conservative approach to running our economy would be versus what President Obama and his allies and what their ideology is all about. So I think moving forward, the financial situation in this country is dire. The need to address it is urgent. But the only way we can really start doing that is by getting the American people on our side. The only way you do that is by informing them of how dire the situation is, first of all, but then also what our solutions would be. So I'm working with, first of all, a group of senators, a growing group, working in concert with a growing group in the House, kind of like we did with Cut, Cap, and Balance. I mean, that was really led by the rank and file.
Right.
And so we developed something called America's Choice Agenda. It's what Paul Ryan was going to call his budget, and I asked him, can we use that for the overall agenda? He said, sure.
Oh,
it makes
great.
sense. Because,
Yeah.
Sandra, let's face it is time for America to choose. The one good thing about President Obama's administration is he has made the difference between our ideology and theirs very stark.
Right.
It's very apparent. So the American Choice Agenda is a comparative agenda. It's just got 5 elements to it. And it shows President Obama's economy, his path versus our path. We're calling it the path of prosperity. And of course, President Obama, what he's been doing is he believes the government should grow. Its control and intrusion over our lives should increase, which of course increases our debt and deficits. We believe we should grow the private sector, that we want to actually reduce government's control over our lives. So that'd be the first element. The next one would be energy utilization. And President Obama, whether it's delaying issuing the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, de facto moratorium in Gulf drilling, not allowing us to drill in Anwar, delayed permits on hydraulic fracturing, across the board, he seeks to limit the use of our own energy resources, which would, by the way, help create energy independence and would create jobs.
Sure.
So we would like to actually utilize America's domestic energy resources to create that energy independence, to create jobs. That's the second point. Third point would be, let's face it, President Obama has engaged in class warfare, class division.
Right.
The great uniter has been the great divider. So he wants to punish success. We actually want to propose and pass pro-growth tax reform. Let's get rid of the 70,000 pages of social engineering and crony capitalism. Let's raise the revenue that we need and do as little economic harm as possible through the tax code, pro-growth tax reform. Then, of course, as we've all watched, his agencies have been in regulatory overdrive. They are strangling our economy. They are hampering the effort of businesses to expand and to create jobs. So again, we're not for getting rid of all regulations. That's one of the roles of government. Antitrust regulations. We want a clean environment.
Right.
But we need some regulatory balance. I mean, the cost of complying with federal regulations in 2008 was $1.75 trillion. That's a larger number than all but 8 economies of the world. It's a 12th of our economy. It's snuffing out job creation. So that's the fourth element. And then the fifth element is really the reason I hopped into this business. It's the healthcare law. I mean, every day I serve, the more I hear about this healthcare law, the fact that they can't even begin to implement it because it's so complex, it's creating such a high level of uncertainty. President Obama and his allies, this has been their dream for decades, a government take over our healthcare system. We need to repeal that.
Right.
And we got to be talking every day about doing that, because it's not only going to destroy our healthcare system, it will destroy an already horribly broken budget. It's just critical we do that. So that's the basic agenda. The strategy behind that is we have to compete against the presidential bully pulpit. And let's face it, many media outlets that try to marginalize our efforts. The only way we do that is in a very highly focused, highly coordinated effort. And so we utilize the one lever of power we have, the House of Representatives. So my suggestion, and what I'm trying to get accomplished, is when we come back from this break, it's not a recess.
Not a recess.
We're just not there. We spend 3 or 4 weeks, and my suggestion would be let's debate, craft, and pass an energy utilization bill. And then while the House is doing that, senators are doing media appearances. We're on the Senate floor. We're debating that issue as well. Our candidates are talking about it. Outside groups, our friends in the media, we concentrate on the energy issue. Next 3 to 4 weeks, Paul Ryan in the House will actually pass a budget. The Senate probably won't. Let's highlight that issue. Let's talk about the debt and deficit issue in a very highly focused and coordinated effort. After that, pro-growth tax reform. Let's have a goal to pass that on April 15th. Then we can address regulatory reform. And again, throughout the process, we've got to be discussing how vital it is. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the Supreme Court will actually repeal the health care law.
Oh, yes.
But if not, and this is the real key here, is we have got to create a mandate for repeal. We actually have to make sure that the 2012 election is a mandate election.
Absolutely.
I don't want to play prevent defense here. I don't want to just limp across the finish line with maybe a victory. And maybe pick up 51 seats in the Senate without a mandate.
Right.
We have to describe to the American people the extent of the problem. Here are the Republican fiscal conservative solutions so that if the American public gives us the power to start solving the problem, we actually have the mandate to start enacting this. So the goal would be to actually have the House pass these measures and go. And then, of course, Harry Reid will probably block it. President Obama will probably refuse to sign the bills.
Yeah.
So, so at least
like
moving
the 15 forgotten bills.
Well, and that's the problem too. So the House passes these bills, but because we don't control the bully pulpit, because it wasn't a really defined and focused and coordinated strategy, nobody knew about them.
Right.
So we shouldn't have something called the forgotten 15.
Right.
And we need to have the very visible 5. That the American people understand this is what the Republicans stand for. This is the problem. Here are their solutions. We're going to vote for them so that in 2013 they have the mandate to actually enact this, and we can start turning this economy around, put America back on a path toward prosperity.
So are you saying that we need a landslide in 2012?
Well, it would certainly help. We need as strong success in the 2012 elections as we possibly can get.
Yes, absolutely. And we need a Republican president. We need to.
Oh, I mean, yes, number one political goal is this has got to be President Obama's only term.
Yes.
We must let him retire.
What are the consequences if he stays on?
Well, you'll see well, first of all of these rules and regulations that is now delaying, because he even understands what economic harm, things like the ozone rule or utility MAC, will cause the economy, which he doesn't want to see happen before his election.
Right.
If he gets reelected, all of these things will be implemented. And you've seen how unserious he's been about addressing the debt and deficit.
Right.
He wants to grow the government. So if he's reelected, he'll continue to not seriously address the debt and deficit issue.
Right. And can we ever survive and get out of the sort of tunnel that we're headed down with him if he stays in for another 4 years?
Well, America will survive, but it's in kind of what form and what does it look like? And what I fear right now, I never feared that August 2nd date, the debt ceiling date. We were going to honor every obligation of the American public or of the American government. We were going to send out Social Security checks. We were going to pay soldiers. We were going to meet every obligation. What I fear, and this is a very legitimate fear, is the real day of reckoning. The day when investors, people that buy our bonds, look at the United States and say, you know what? I'm not going to loan you any more money. Or what's more likely to happen is I'll loan you money, but at much dramatically higher interest rates. Our debt to GDP ratio right now is 100%. When Greece hit their debt crisis, their debt to GDP ratio was 127%. And there's nothing magic about that number, other than in economic history, once a nation state hits 90%, it really dramatically affects their ability to grow economically. And that's what we have to have as the number one component of a solution is economic growth. So when Greece hit their debt crisis, their interest rate spiked, increased by 8% in a very short period of time. If that were to happen in the US, our interest rate would increase by $1.2 trillion per year.
Wow.
That would wipe out all discretionary spending. That's a third of our budget. It's simply not sustainable.
Unbelievable.
So that's what I'm trying to work on.
Wow.
That's been my focus, to try and instill some fiscal discipline in the United States so we don't hit that debt crisis. But we haven't been very successful because we have not had a willing partner in this president or the majority leader in the Senate.
Right. Wow. Well, they say that this is a do or die year in politics. So that it will change the United States forever if we don't have a Republican president. And
This is, we all said
it will
2000.
change history forever, the history of the United States forever.
This is a very important election.
I have heard it said that without Wisconsin and without Ohio, a president can't win this election. So Wisconsin is a very important swing state. And I'm wondering if you have picked a candidate to endorse in this election at this point.
We're still pretty early on that we need some votes to be cast. But let's kind of wrap up by talking a little bit about Wisconsin and how important it is that, first of all, we reward the elected officials that actually had the courage to make hard decisions, take tough votes to start solving a problem. We need to send a very strong signal to the rest of America that those elected officials that show that kind of courage will be rewarded by at least being able to serve out their term. So, I mean, right now we're going to be facing probably a recall election for Governor Walker and the Republican senators. Those folks need to be rewarded by at least letting them remain in office to finish their terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are 100% behind Governor Walker and hope that he does stay in office. Well, it has been a pleasure to meet with you today. You have been a wealth of information, and I have enjoyed talking with you immensely.
Well, I enjoyed it, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. And I know that our audience has enjoyed meeting with Senator Johnson today. And so thank you for letting us in your living rooms today. And please come back and see us again. If you want to speak to us, go to www.whosright.org, and we'll speak to you soon. Good afternoon.